स्काई 847 संगत टीवी के उत्ते तुहाडा सारिਆਂ ਦਾ स्वागत है। तुहाडे दोस्त APS मान दे नाल। दोस्तों अज संगत टीवी की टीम पहुंची है वुलवरहैम्पटन दे विच सिटी सेंटर दे जिथे वॉर मैमोरीअल बनिया ते इत्थे अज याद किया जा रहा है उन्हां शहीदां नूं जिन्हां ने 12 सितंबर 1897 के दिन सारागढ़ी की लड़ाई दे विच अपनी जान की बाजी लगा दी। वो 21 सिंह जिन्हां ने 7000 8000 की गिणती के कबीले के लोगों के नाल लड़ाई लड़ी अते गढ़ी नूं ना छड्डदे होए अपनी जानां वार गए। अज उन्हां दी याद दे विच इत्थे शरधा दे फुੱਲ भेंट किए जा रहे हैं। आओ आपां चलदे हां ते गलबात करदे हां ते देखदे हां कि इत्थे अज किस तरीके नाल उन्हां शहीदां नूं याद किया जा रहा है। ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਖੜੇ ਨੇ ਅਜੈਬ ਸਿੰਘ ਗਰਚਾ ਜੀ। ਆਪਾਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਤੇ ਪੁੱਛਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਕਿ ਅੱਜ ਇੱਥੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਇਵੈਂਟ ਮਨਾਇਆ ਗਿਆ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਸ਼ਹੀਦਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਇੱਕ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਜਦੋਂ ਕੋਈ ਜੰਗ ਦੇ ਮੈਦਾਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਲੜ ਕੇ ਮਰਦਾ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਸ਼ਹੀਦ ਕਿਹਾ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਤੇ ਅੱਜ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਸ਼ਹੀਦਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਯਾਦ ਕੀਤਾ, ਕੀ ਮਹਿਸੂਸ ਕਰਦੇ ਹੋ?
बेहद खुशी महसूस हो रही है जी। मैं समझदा उन्होंने लोगों को जिन्होंने शायद घर बैठे अज तक नहीं पता सीगा कि ये वार मैमोरीअल नाम की चीज़ की हैगी आ। ये दस देना उचित समझेगा कि 1914 तो 1919 सॉरी 1914 तो 1919 तो 1935 तो 1945 जो दो जंगा हुई उन्होंने जंगा दौरान इंडो कैनेडियन सॉरी इंडो इंग्लिश जोड़े सोल्जर से उन्होंने रल के ये लड़ाई लड़ियाँ और जित्तां प्राप्त की। उन्होंने जित्तां प्राप्त कीतियां दा सेहरा ही असीं अज इंग्लैंड च वस रहे हैं। सो सानूं खुशी महसूस हो रही है कि असीं उन्हां लोगों नूं जिहड़े इस समय तो बाद पैदा होए आ जां रहिंदी दुनिया तक ये जिहड़ी खबर रहेगी उन्हां लोगों नूं दस्सण च एंग्लो सिख हैरीटेज ट्रायल के चेयरमैन सरदार हरविंदर सिंह जी राणा कामयाब होए आ कि घर बैठिया उन्होंने एक खबर मिली हैगी। मैं समझदा भी इस गल का जो सारा सेहरा है ये एंग्लो सिख हैरीटेज ट्रायल के जो चेयरमैन है हरविंदर सिंह राणा जी जाता है। उन्होंने संगठन हो के सारे TV चैनल नूं सद के इस मैमोरीअल स्टोनस नूं जिहड़ा है दिखाया। मैं समझदा सब तो वड्डी ये प्राप्ति है उन्होंने अज की डेट च।
हाँ जी, ये तो राणा जी की तुसीं प्राप्ति दसी। आपां जे याद करिए उन्हां ਸਿੰਘਾਂ ਨੂੰ जिन्हां ने उस सारागढ़ी की चौंकी दे विच उस पोस्ट के उत्ते लड़ाई की उन्हां नूं तकरीबन साडी जिहड़ी ज़्यादा कौम है साडी कौम दे विच मोस्टली याद नहीं किया जाता पर हौली हौली अवेयरनैस वध रही है। तुसीं इहदे ते की कमेंट करना चाहोगे?
मैं समझदा इहदे भी उपराला राणा जी कर रहे हैं। सारागढ़ी के संबंध च जदों इकट्ठे होकर सोल्जर लड़े आ उहदी बदौलत ही असीं आज़ाद हाँ ते असीं इंग्लैंड च वस रहे हैं। अगर वो लड़ाई उस मौके ते हार जाते तो शायद साडा जीना मुहाल हुंदा। सो मैं समझदा वो अज दे समय ते सानूं साडा फर्ज बनदा उस मौके ते हो चुके शहीदां नूं नतमस्तक होना। सो इसे काम लिए जिथे हाज़र होए हैं उन्होंने शरधा के फुੱਲ भेंट किए हैं। सो सब तो वड्डी आज़ादी की जिहड़ी लड़ाई है वो लड़ी गई हैगी है। सो मैं समझदा भी वो एक वड्डी जंग सी जिहनूं जित के असीं अज आज़ाद महसूस कर रहे हैं।
साडे नाल गलबात करन लई संगत TV ते आउण लई तुहाडा धन्नवाद।
बेहद जी शुक्रिया तुहाडा भी भाई साहब, शुक्रिया, थैंक यू।
ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਖੜੇ ਨੇ ਹਰਵਿੰਦਰ ਸਿੰਘ ਰਾਣਾ ਜੀ ਜੋ ਕਿ ਐਂਗਲੋ ਸਿੱਖ ਹੈਰੀਟੇਜ ਟ੍ਰਾਇਲ ਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਸੰਸਥਾ ਚਲਾਉਂਦੇ ਨੇ ਤੇ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਨੇ ਅੱਜ ਇਹ ਉਦਮ ਕੀਤਾ ਤੇ ਇੱਥੇ ਉਸ ਸਾਰਾਗੜੀ ਦੇ ਸ਼ਹੀਦਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਯਾਦ ਕੀਤਾ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਤੇ ਇਸ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਸੰਸਥਾ ਹੋਰ ਵੀ ਕਾਫੀ ਕੰਮ ਕਰਦੀ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ। ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਸੰਗਤ TV ਤੇ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਹੈ ਜੀ।
ਥੈਂਕ ਯੂ ਜੀ।
ਅੱਜ ਇੱਥੇ ਇੰਗਲੈਂਡ ਦੀ ਇਸ ਧਰਤੀ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ 115 ਸਾਲ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਜੋ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਦੇ ਉਸ ਏਰੀਏ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਲੜਾਈ ਹੋਈ जिथे 21 जवानों ने अपनी जान की बाजी लाई तो खालसे के उस कंसैप्ट नूं कि 1.25 लाख से एक लड़ाऊ नूं सही करके दिखाया। तुसीं की कहना चाहोगे?
देखो जी, ये बहुत वड्डी उन्हां दी मिसाल सी। इस नूं कायम रखना, इस दी याद नूं कायम रखना, इस नूं दोहराउणा ये साडा फर्ज बनता है। सिख इतिहास बना लेंदे ने लेकिन इतिहास नूं याद रखना और इतिहास नूं साਂਭਣਾ एक होर काम है। और असीं ये बीड़ा इस करके चुक्या कि जे 12 सितंबर 1897 वाली ये जंग की याददाश्त सिखां दे विचों भुल गई, अंग्रेज़ां विचों भुल गई ਤੇ ਉਹ ਇੱਕ ਬਹੁਤ ਵੱਡਾ ਨੁਕਸਾਨ ਹੋਏਗਾ। ਅਸੀਂ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਕਿ ਸਮੂਹ ਸਿੱਖ ਇਕੱਠੇ ਹੋ ਕੇ ਸਾਲਾਨਾ ਤੌਰ ਤੇ ਇਸ ਨੂੰ ਯਾਦ ਕਰਨ ਤਾਂ ਕਿ ਇੱਥੇ ਦੀ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜੋ ਆਪਣੀ ਵਿਲੱਖਣਤਾ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਆਪਾਂ ਕਾਇਮ ਰੱਖ ਸਕੀਏ।
ਧੰਨਵਾਦ ਜੀ। ਤੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਨਾਲ ਭਾਜੀ ਖੜੇ ਨੇ, ਆਪਾਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਵੀ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ। ਭਾਈ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਪੂਰਾ ਨਾਂ ਜੀ?
ਮੇਰਾ ਨਾਮ ਜਗਦੀਸ਼ ਸਿੰਘ ਹੈ, ਮੈਂ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਤੋਂ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਤੋਂ ਆਇਆ ਜੀ।
ਤੇ ਸਾਡਾ ਸਵਾਲ ਇਹ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਤੋਂ ਇੱਥੇ ਆ ਕੇ ਜਦੋਂ ਦੇਖਦੇ ਹੋ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਜੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਕਰੀਏ ਤਾਂ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਵੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸਾਰਾਗੜ੍ਹੀ ਦੀ ਉਹ ਜੰਗ ਆ ਉਹਦੀ ਤਕਰੀਬਨ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਯਾਦ ਆ ਵਿਸਾਰ ਚੁੱਕੇ ਆ ਆਪਾਂ, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕੀ ਮਹਿਸੂਸ ਕਰਦੇ ਹੋ?
ਅੱਜ ਜਦੋਂ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਸਰਦਾਰ ਅਜੈਬ ਸਿੰਘ ਗਰਚਾ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਦਾ ਔਰ ਹਰਵਿੰਦਰ ਸਿੰਘ ਰਾਣਾ ਜੀ ਦਾ ਮੈਸੇਜ ਲੱਗਾ ਵੀ ਸਾਰਾਗੜ੍ਹੀ ਦੇ ਸ਼ਹੀਦਾਂ ਦੀ ਯਾਦ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਆਪਾਂ ਕੋਈ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਲਿਖਿਆ, ਜਦੋਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਤਾਂ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਲੱਗਾ ਆਣ ਕੇ, ਜਦੋਂ ਆਣ ਕੇ ਇੱਥੇ ਮੈਂ ਆਣ ਕੇ ਦੇਖਿਆ ਆਪਣੀ ਲੂਈ ਕੰਡੀ ਜੀ ਖੜੀ ਹੋ ਗਈ ਆਣ ਕੇ ਵੀ ਸਾਡੇ ਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਨੇ ਮਤਲਬ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਇੰਨਾ ਉਪਰਾਲਾ, ਦੂਸਰੀ ਧਰਤੀ 'ਤੇ ਆਣ ਕੇ ਵੀ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਸ਼ਹੀਦਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਇੰਨਾ ਵੱਡਾ ਉੱਚਾ ਰੁਤਬਾ ਦਿੱਤਾ, ਯਾਦ ਕੀਤਾ ਆ। ਠੀਕ ਹੈ, ਇਹ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਦੀ ਬੜੀ ਔਰ ਸਾਡੇ ਮਾਣ ਵਾਲੀ ਗੱਲ ਆ। ਇੱਦਾਂ ਦੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਵੀਰ ਸਾਡੇ ਉਪਰਾਲਾ ਕਰਦੇ ਪਏ ਨੇ, ਅਸੀਂ ਤਾਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਧੰਨਵਾਦ ਕਰਦੇ ਵੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਥੱਕਦੇ ਵੀ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਜੋ ਉਪਰਾਲਾ ਕੀਤਾ ਆ, ਤਾਂ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਬਹੁਤ ਹੀ ਚੰਗਾ ਲੱਗਾ।
ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰਨ ਦੇ ਲਈ ਸੰਗਤ ਟੀਵੀ 'ਤੇ ਆਉਣ ਲਈ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਦਾ ਧੰਨਵਾਦ ਜੀ। ਅੱਜ ਅਸੀਂ ਖੜੇ ਹਾਂ ਉਸ ਜਗ੍ਹਾ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਯਾਦ ਕੀਤਾ ਗਿਆ ਸਾਰਾਗੜ੍ਹੀ ਦੇ ਸ਼ਹੀਦਾਂ ਨੂੰ, ਤੇ ਇਸ ਧਰਤੀ ਦੇ ਜੰਮਪਲ ਗੋਰਿਆਂ ਨੇ ਵੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸ਼ਰਧਾਂਜਲੀ ਦਿੱਤੀ। ਤੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ। ਵੈਲਕਮ ਔਨ ਸੰਗਤ ਟੀਵੀ।
Hello there, how are you?
What's your name, sir?
My name's Nick Roberts.
Okay, Mr. Roberts, what do you think about Saragarhi? Because it happens 115 years ago, and Sikhs, they were in a battle, just 22 guys against massive crowd. So, what is your opinion about it?
Well, being I'm an artilleryman myself, right, served in the Royal Artillery. I was told about this from a chap called Pete Lloyd, right, and he was the chap who organised me to be here today to do this particular service, which I'm quite honoured to do, right, because I've always had respect for the Sikhs and the Indian regiments, right, who served for the British governments and the Crown, right, and they don't get the recognition that they should get. Now this is because of the fall of the empire, I put it down to, which was when the Japanese attacked Singapore and all around the Pacific. After the war was finished in 1945, the Indian regiment sought their own independence, and from then on, that's the reason why the Indian regiments, in my understanding, didn't get the recognition that they should have got.
UNO, they recognized that war, the battle of Saragarhi,
right,
as one of the 8 greatest war on the world.
That's
So,
right.
what is your comment on that?
Well, this has been a surprise to me because I didn't know about this situation until today. Because it's like I say to you, a lot of your history doesn't come out to the British people or to the British service people, and this is why I understand with the Sikh people who are dealing with this now, who've got to see it today, they're the people who are going to do a fantastic job by bringing this out into the open, right, and hoping by in 2014 we'll see a far bigger presentation of what's gone on today. That's my view.
Okay, thank you very much for your appreciative opinions, and I'll let you know that because Sikhs, they didn't have any media, so now we will try to tell the world and the rest of people that what happened in Saragarhi and what happened here today. Thank you very much.
My pleasure, thank you.
Thank you. ਅੱਜ ਆਪਣੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਸ਼ਹੀਦਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸ਼ਰਧਾਂਜਲੀ ਦਿੱਤੀ ਗਈ, ਤੇ ਇਸ ਪੱਥਰ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਜੋ ਲਿਖਿਆ ਮੈਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਪੜ੍ਹ ਕੇ ਸੁਣਾ ਦਿੰਦਾ। When you go home, tell them of us and say for your tomorrow we gave our today. ਹਰ ਇੱਕ ਦਾ ਫਰਜ਼ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਆਪਣੇ ਸ਼ਹੀਦਾਂ ਨੂੰ, ਆਪਣੇ ਕੌਮ ਦੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਯੋਧਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਯਾਦ ਰੱਖਣਾ, ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਿਸੇ ਚੰਗੇ ਕਾਰਜ ਦੇ ਲਈ ਆਪਣੀ ਸ਼ਹਾਦਤ ਦਿੱਤੀ ਹੋਵੇ। ਤੇ ਅੱਜ ਇਸ ਜਗ੍ਹਾ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਸ਼ਰਧਾ ਦੇ ਫੁੱਲ ਭੇਂਟ ਕੀਤੇ ਗਏ ਨੇ ਅਤੇ ਯਾਦ ਕੀਤਾ ਗਿਆ ਉਸ ਕਨਸੈਪਟ ਨੂੰ ਜਿਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਗੁਰੂ ਗੋਬਿੰਦ ਸਿੰਘ ਜੀ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਸੀ ਕਿ 1.25 ਲੱਖ ਸੇ ਏਕ ਲੜਾਊਂ ਤਵੈ ਗੋਬਿੰਦ ਸਿੰਘ ਨਾਮ ਕਹਾਊਂ, ਕਿ ਕਿਸ ਤਰੀਕੇ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ 21 ਸਿੰਘਾਂ ਨੇ ਇੱਕ ਐਡੀ ਵੱਡੀ ਜੰਗ ਲੜੀ ਅਤੇ ਉਸ ਜੰਗ ਨੂੰ ਅਸੀਂ ਅੱਜ ਭੁੱਲ ਗਏ ਹਾਂ। ਪਰ ਸੰਗਤ ਟੀਵੀ ਦੀ ਕੋਸ਼ਿਸ਼ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਯਾਦ ਕਰਾਇਆ ਜਾਵੇ, ਸਾਡੇ ਇਤਿਹਾਸ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਜਾਣੂ ਕਰਾਇਆ ਜਾਵੇ ਤੇ ਅੱਜ ਅਸੀਂ ਉਸ ਆਪਣੇ ਸੂਰਵੀਰਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਯਾਦ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ।
खालसा मेरी जान की जान, खालसा मेरो, खालसा मेरो पिंड प्राण, खालसा मेरी जान की जान, खालसा मेरी जान की जान। खालसा मेरो रूप है खास, खालसा मेरो रूप है खास, खालसे में हो करो निवास, खालसे में हो करो निवास, खालिस में हो, खालिस में हो करो निवास, खालसा मेरी जान की जान, खालसा मेरी जान की जान, खालसा मेरो, खालसा मेरो पिंड प्राण, खालसा मेरी जान की जान। खालसा मेरो मुख है अंगा, खालसा मेरो मुख है अंगा, खालिस के हो सद सद संगा, खालिस के हो सद सद संगा, खालिस मेरो, खालसा मेरो पिंड प्राण, खालसा मेरी जान की जान, खालसा मेरी जान की जान।
वाहिगुरु जी का खालसा, वाहिगुरु जी की फतेह। प्यारी साध संगत जीओ, आप जी ਨੂੰ पता ही है कि अज ਆਪਾਂ ਸਾਰੇ ਜਾਣੇ जो 1897 ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਾਰਾਗੜ੍ਹੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਿੰਘ ਸ਼ਹੀਦ ਹੋਏ ਸਨ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਯਾਦ ਵਿੱਚ ਆਪ ਸਮੂਹ ਸੰਗਤ ਇਕੱਤਰ ਹੋ ਕਰਕੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਯਾਦ ਨੂੰ ਸਮਰਪਿਤ ਇਹ ਸਮਾਗਮ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ। ਸੋ ਸਮੂਹ ਆਈ ਹੋਈ ਸੰਗਤ ਦਾ ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰਾ ਗੁਰੂ ਤੇਗ ਬਹਾਦਰ ਸਿੱਖ ਟੈਂਪਲ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਜੀ ਆਇਆਂ। ਹੁਣ ਜੋ ਛੋਟੇ ਛੋਟੇ ਬੱਚੇ ਹਨ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਸ਼ਹੀਦਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਆਪਾਂ ਯਾਦ ਕਰਦੇ ਹੋਏ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਯਾਦ ਵਿੱਚ ਜੋ ਇਹ ਪਲਾਂਟ ਲਗਾਉਣੇ ਹਨ ਇਹ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਦੁਆਰਾ ਲਗਾਏ ਜਾਣਗੇ। ਸੋ ਹੁਣ ਬੇਨਤੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਜੋ ਇਹ ਰਸਮ ਹੈ ਇਸ ਨੂੰ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾਵੇ। ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ, ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ।
Thank you all very much, kids, for coming. And I hope you've had a good experience in planting some of these flowers. Yes? We all have, boys and girls? Yes, that's good, good. Okay, right. What I want to tell you is these plants, we need to water them, and they'll be watered weekly. We'll look after them. And you guys have to come into the Gurdwara, yes, every week, and make sure you know what's going on with your plant. You know which one yours is, yeah? These trees, as many of you will know, that we have got a new primary school opening next year, 2013, which is called Anand Primary School. These plants, these trees, conifers, will be transferred from here next year to the new school. So that will be a living memory of what we've done here for Saragarhi for many years to come. Will that be good? Yeah. Okay. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
एक ओंकार सतनाम करता पुरख निर्भव निर्वैर अकामूर्त जुनी शफा गुप्त साचा आदि सच शिगाद सच है भी सच नानक होशी पीसा.
For assisting us, in fact leading this effort to celebrate Saragarhi at a national level in Wolverhampton today. It's a very energetic team. It's a team that is blessed with talent. Energy and talent don't always come together necessarily in one scenario, but they have done this time, and we're very grateful to them for taking the initiative in working with us on this project. It is briefer than I intended, because I think some of you are already approaching bedtime, and I don't want concentration to be suffering to go along. Why are we doing this? Why the need to remember the Battle of Saragarhi? I think that's a very useful starting point. In medical terms, and I don't know whether there are any medics or pharmacists here, but when an individual begins to lose his memory, that is classified as dementia. And sometimes the way it manifests itself, the way it appears, is that they can not only start to forget things about their family, about their wives, they can sometimes wake up and not recognize themselves, or something that they have done all of their life, like comb their hair, brush their teeth. They forget how to do that. Now, if you apply that to a community or to a nation, then losing your heritage is really that happening at a bigger scale. So if an individual who loses his memory is considered to be disabled, considered to be disadvantaged, then you can imagine what happens when that is afflicted onto a whole community. So one of the reasons we are taking this initiative of Saragarhi forward is that it actually falls into that gap. It is in danger of being forgotten. The Sikhs throughout their history have been extremely good at making history. In fact, there's a British scholar who wrote over 150 years ago. He said, a remarkable people, they're Sikhs, with their 5 distinguishing symbols, their baptism ceremony of water stirred with steel, a people who have made history and will surely make it again. But in my opinion, I don't think it's sufficient to just make history. History has to be preserved and history has to be remembered. And that is why we're particularly proud of this initiative and to be working with this Gurdwara and its associate Gurdwaras in preserving the Battle of Saragarhi. I want to start at 1699 because I think it's important. We can't see the Battle of Saragarhi in isolation, but all of you know what happens in 1699. But there was something raised, there was a slogan raised there by Guru Gobind Singh Ji, which was Raj Karega Khalsa. We repeat that often without understanding what it means. But actually that slogan was realized in 1801 in reality. But that journey from Anandpur to Lahore and the kingdom of Ranjit Singh was a journey that took us through some of the darkest days in our history. It was a journey full of holocausts. We talk about the Jewish holocausts. Proportionately, the holocaust that the Sikhs suffered, given their population at that time, was actually no less great. We were persecuted, we were cut to limbs, our limbs were cut to pieces, we were scalped. But by 1801, that remarkable journey that started in 1699 meant that we had been transformed from people who were hunted down to people who had our own kingdom. And under the leadership of Maharaja Ranjit Singh, and this is a separate lecture for a separate time, and this is particularly for the youngsters, the size of the Sikh kingdom under Maharaja Ranjit Singh was greater than Great Britain is today. Much greater, and in relative terms, given the value of the East India Company's assets, it was actually the richest state in India at that time. That's something that we forget, and we forget at our peril. But the remarkable thing about what happened in 1801 is that it was a tremendous reversal of fortune. I mean, if you think about it, in 1606, Guru Arjan Dev Ji had been executed, but now his followers were enjoying the trappings of the palaces and of leisure in the same city in which he had been executed, in Lahore. You know, he had had hot sand put on his body as he sat on a hot plate, but now Maharaja Ranjit Singh in that very city sat on a golden throne, unparalleled in its beauty and its value. Bhai Taru Singh had been scalped, but now the Sikhs were wearing the dastars with the diamonds such as the Kohinoor in those same very heads that had been chopped off for centuries earlier. So it was a remarkable transformation, and I said this is the wrong time to dwell on the rule of Ranjit Singh. That's a lecture in itself. But the lesson of history is that it came to an end. That powerful kingdom, which meant that from 1801 to 1839, we had one of the most powerful, most prosperous, most stable, most tolerant states seen on the face of the earth, actually fell to the British. It fell partly due to their ambitions of expansion, but also as much due to our own deficiencies. And those deficiencies are sadly still here today. But as a result of that, the British, who had invaded most of India, in fact, I think invasion is probably the wrong word, they had sleepwalked their way into most of India, but even before Maharaja Ranjit Singh died, they were looking at ways to grab Punjab. Punjab was seen as the ultimate goal. They weren't going to do it whilst Ranjit Singh was alive, because they had no prospect of victory. And in fact, I've been talking to some historians over the last few months, and I think one of the greatest unknowns in Sikh history is going to be that had Maharaja Ranjit Singh confronted the British and taken them into battle, I suspect that we would be living in a totally different world today. The concept of India as we know it now would not have existed. The British Empire as we remember it up to 1947 would not have existed. Afghanistan, this perennial thorn in the side of superpowers, would not have existed. But that is history, and we can't turn it back. But what happens from 1846 to 1854, during the period of the Anglo-Sikh Wars, is that the British encounter the most fierce resistance that they have met in the whole of the Indian subcontinent, if not of the globe. And these aren't my words, and I know that some of you are young, but I hope that at the right time you will pick up the right texts, and you will read that these battles, the 6 battles between the British and the Sikhs, were not described as battles for Punjab. George Bruce, in his authoritative book, calls it 6 battles for India, because it was these 6 battles that decided the fate of the British for the whole of India. This was the ultimate prize, with the Sikh nation as their conquest of India was complete. But why would their conquest have been complete? Because the geography, and I want to just move on to the geography slightly, the geography for them was important, because at that time, unlike now, unlike in recent years, it wasn't Russia and America and China that were the big superpowers. The big superpowers were those nations that had developed the navies. Portugal to some extent, but Britain and France were the 2 big superpowers. And whilst the British had occupied India, there was always the threat that France was going to collaborate with Prussia and come into India from the north. In fact, those of you who ever go on to study the life of Dalip Singh, towards the end of his life, that is the conspiracy that he's caught up in. That he wants to take the help of the French and the Russians and to invade India from the north and liberate Punjab. So this area of the northwest frontier, where very close to where the American and British troops are now, around Afghanistan, around parts of northwest province in Pakistan, is where we're talking about now. And the British had realized after the end of the Anglo-Sikh Wars that they could not afford to have the Sikhs to be on the wrong side of the Sikhs again. If you look at the documentation, the last thing the British wanted and could afford was a third conflict with the Sikhs. Because in one of the battles during the Anglo-Sikh Wars, the Battle of Firozshah, they had actually been ready to surrender. They had given orders to destroy all papers, and that they were ready to surrender. Now, had betrayal not affected the outcome of that battle, the British would have been forced out of Punjab at the Battle of Firozshah. But they learned their lesson, and which is something we don't do. They learned the lesson. They realized that the Sikhs were better to have fighting shoulder to shoulder. And from 1854 onwards, you see them recruiting battalion after battalion of Sikhs into the British Army. They recognized 3 martial races: the Sikhs, the Gurkhas, and the Rajputs. And they recruit them. But the greatest over-recruitment comes from the Sikhs. One thing the British realized is that the greatest soldiers are not just Sikhs. There are Sikhs who are first and foremost followers of their religion. So at that time it was essential that if you wanted to join the Sikh regiment, you had to be a fully Amritdhari Sikhs. There were no concessions, no half measures. That was it, because that's what made the good soldier. You couldn't just say, well, I'm from Punjab and my name is Singh, therefore I must be recruited. You had to be observant of the 5 Ks, and you had to demonstrate that before they would even look at you for recruitment. I'm just going to skip forward a lot now, but around the 1900s, Afghanistan, again, like now, the history is repeating itself. In fact, we went to a talk by a very distinguished British writer, William Dalrymple, last year, and he said if Blair and Bush had bothered to go on Amazon and spend $5.99 and read about the first Afghan wars, they could have saved billions of dollars and hundreds of lives by knowing that they should not have gone into Afghanistan when they did. But in about 1900s, the Afghanistanis are rebelling against the British, which was ironic because when Maharaja Ranjit Singh was alive, the British had actually encouraged the Afghans to rise against him. But now the tide has turned. But by the start of 1897, you have the second Afghan campaign coming to the boil. This is remote territory and the British must hold it, because should they be overrun, then it is quite possible that the French and the Russians are going to come in and the British Raj in India is going to be threatened. So by the start of 1897, the British take a decision that some of the critical positions along the northwest frontier have to be reinforced, and they choose the Sikh regiment to do some of that most crucial work. Again, it was no coincidence. When this regiment of the Sikhs, the 36th Sikhs, was raised, the orders are available now. It said we must go to Jalandhar, Doab. That is where the finest Sikhs are found, and that is where we must recruit. So I'm not sure whether many of you are from outside Jalandhar, but for that I must apologize right now. But the fact is that they were Sikhs, and that is what made them the candidates for this. 1897, the whole of the northwest frontier has been invaded by hundreds of thousands of hostile tribesmen. Now, these aren't your Boy Scouts or Girl Guides. These are some of the fiercest, war-hardened tribes that you will find. They have been the backbone of the Taliban. They're the people who drove the Russians out of Afghanistan. And we are up against their ancestors. This was no picnic, and nor was it fought on flat territory in temperate climates. These are sub-zero temperatures. These are high peaks at altitude, which are difficult to get to. There are no roads. There is no mechanized way of moving. It's by mules or by foot. And again, for the task, they moved the 36th Sikhs up. And what we're seeing by the beginning of September are all the ingredients coming together for what, by all standards, is one of the greatest battles in the history of mankind. Some of you who know a bit about history will have heard about that film on 300, this film that goes back to 480 BC, where you've got 300 Spartans fighting against about 60,000 Persians. Fine. But then if you look at the statistics for what we're leading up to, you've got 21 Sikhs fighting against around 10,000. I mean, the figure is open to discussion, but the 10,000 figure comes not from Sikh sources, it comes from their British commanding officer, who witnessed up to 10 battle standards, and one battle standard usually led 1,000 men. So this is not our figure, in case we have exaggerated it. But the 21 Sikhs fighting 10,000 actually works out to a ratio of 1 to 416. So I want you to bear that figure in mind, because it's important. This is not our territory, this is not our backyard. We're not used to these conditions. The Sikhs have fought the British along the plains of the Satluj, where the terrain has been flat, where the climate has been in our favor. This is their territory, this is their backyard, and we are the outsiders. We are at a disadvantage. By the 12th of September, it's quite clear that what the Afghans are going to adopt is what's called an anvil and hammer approach. By anvil, they isolate the position, they starve it of contact, and then they strike. Now, can I get I need three youngsters. I need one very tall youngster here, just very briefly, because I want to illustrate this point, and then I want two short youngsters, and I'll show you what we're going to do. Come on. Two kids. This is the tall one. Right. Okay, come on. No, he's the tall one. Right. You stand there, you here, you there, like that. Face that way, and you're there. Right. Now, each one of these is a mountain, right? This is Saragarhi, and this is where the Sikhs are. Here at Fort Lockhart, and here at Fort Gulistan is where there are British troops. But these are ridges, these are mountains, really high mountains. If he wants to communicate with them, he can't, because you've got a mountain in the middle. So the Sikhs are here because Fort Gulistan Fort Lockhart, will send a signal to the Sikhs here, and they will pass the signal on. Otherwise, if he's been surrounded by 50,000 Afghans, there's no way that she will know and she can come to his help. Alternatively, if this position is under threat, they have no idea of knowing what's going on. So it's important, this is before mobile phones, this is before telephones. This position is critical because their survival rests on him. So that is, I'm trying to set the scene graphically. If they are to survive, then he must also survive. The minute he fails in his task of communicating, they can be picked off one by one and you can't do anything. Thank you. So that's where the Sikh position is. 21 Sikhs in a fort which is probably no bigger than this room. And they're led by a Haldar Ishar Singh. He's not very old actually. He's probably barely 30, 31. This is one of the sad things, that those records are not available anymore. We're very bad at preserving history. But Ishar Singh is 31 and the other 20 Sikhs are probably from around his area. Some of them are related. Some of them might even be brothers. And the youngest one probably be 17, 16, but they're all volunteers. Now, their commanding officer is here at Fort Lockhart, a chap called Colonel Horton, who actually went to school in Shrewsbury first and then went on to command the Sikhs. He is watching all this, but he is helpless because he can see the Sikh post being surrounded, but because using their anvil and hammer tactics, they have surrounded him. He's helpless. But he must make sure that they communicate so that the fort on the other side is safe. So by the morning of the 12th of September, you find that the Afghans have made the first move. Now, we're not fighting with tanks here, we haven't got mortars, there are no drones. The only thing you've got are the equivalent of Lee Enfield rifles, which can fire about 10 rounds a minute if you're very fast. This is going to be a brutal battle. But Ishar Singh looks out on the morning of the 12th of September, and it's a terrific sight because it's terrifying to anybody to find that you are totally surrounded on all sides, and all you've got is something the size of this room, made of stone, but that is it. There is no other way out. There's no escape route, there's not going to be any helicopter rescue. So he must have looked out and he must have realized that he had a fight on his hands. What the Afghans had done, and what they started to do, was send a first approach party in to attack. There's only one wooden gate. They attacked the gate. Now, you can imagine the noise of 10,000 people attacking a room of this size. You can imagine the fear that they must have felt. You must imagine their sentiments. Because they must have had sisters, they must have had brothers back home, they must have had parents, maybe some of them had wives. And they must have realized that this was going to be perhaps their last stand, and indeed it was. Haldar Ishar Singh asks his signaller Gurmukh Singh to send a signal to Horton to say, we need reinforcements. Horton, to his credit, tries to send out a relief party to help them, but he himself has been isolated. And the minute he sends a signal back, and they signal using flags and a heliograph, which is a mirror which reflects the light from the sun. And the signal comes back from Horton, reinforcements not possible. And from the minute that signal arrives, their fate is sealed. So the first assault the Afghans make is at the gate. The bugle goes, Haldar Ishar Singh gets his men to defend the gate, and they're using their guns, and I'm told there's about 200 casualties on that first assault. But the Afghans have used it to find out the strength of the Sikhs. And their next attack actually isn't at the gate, it's at all corners of the fort, because by doing that they're getting the Sikhs to disperse into smaller groups, which makes it easy for them to attack and makes it impossible for the Sikhs to fire a volley, a concentrated volley. You know, it's one thing 21 people firing from one position, but you then start firing in 2s and 3s, you're not having that effect anymore. I'm told from, and all of this is being witnessed by Colonel Horton, so these aren't my facts, these are Colonel Horton recording these facts in his diary. At 2 o'clock they're low on ammunition, and by this time they're down to 10 men. So 11 of them have been killed by the battle. The Afghans also had rifles, so even with the greatest bravery in the world, there's only so many people you can resist. And I'm told that at about 2 o'clock, again Gurmukh Singh sends a signal back saying, we need more ammunition, our ammunition is low. And again the signal comes back, the helpless signal reply from Colonel Horton saying, not possible, we just simply can't get any more supplies to you. So then what we're getting is wave of attack after attack. It's very easy when you're on the outside to just replenish your troops, send more people forward, let people rest, send more people forward. And then that by about 3 o'clock, what's happening is that the Afghans are resorting to this tactic whereby they set fire to the bushes around the fort and move in under the cover of the smoke. They use that cover to start picking away at some of the stones, and they breach the walls. And according to Horton, by about 4 o'clock, Ishar Singh has been injured, and the Afghans managed to breach the wall. They managed to enter the fort. Although he's hurt, he takes 2 of his men with him, and they try to repel them, but all they've got left are bayonets. And that's where Ishar Singh falls in trying to defend the fort. All 3 of them are overwhelmed, and then by the time they've done that, there are only 4 more Sikhs left. The signaller, Gurmukh Singh, and 3 others. And then at about 3:30 maybe, Gurmukh Singh is signaling back saying, main gate has been breached, I request permission to dismount and join the fight. He realizes this is going to be his last signal. Now each of those people who are fighting on that day, they would have had sentiments that are going through their minds. And all that the historians tell us is that whilst they may have been new to the battle of Saragarhi, this was not new to them in the sense of their heritage. They're in the northwest frontier. Ishar Singh would have told them about Hari Singh Nalwa and his exploits. He would have heard about General Sham Singh Atari and what he did. So they would have drawn upon these references. They would have had their heroes from Chamkaur Digadi all the way up, and that is what they would have relied on in order to draw their strength to the last minute. So the amazing thing about Gurmukh Singh is he sends a signal back saying, I request permission to join the fight. There's only 4 of them left now. And out of the 10,000, apparently the total number of casualties was about 600. So now, before it was 21 against 10,000, it's now 4 against 9,500. So the odds haven't changed. 7 hours the battle has gone on, but then Colonel Horton can see that Gurmukh Singh is no longer signalling, the fort is overrun, they set fire to it, and for that is the signal from the Afghans that they've managed to destroy the fort. There is a relief force that is sent up by Colonel Horton the day after, by which time they've managed to disperse. And when this relief force reaches the fort, they find the bodies of all the Sikhs mutilated. This is nothing new. This is what happened in the northwest frontier. And in fact, that image, the image on the left is of not of those 21 Sikhs, but is of that battalion. But that picture on the right is of the relief force, and that is the ruins of the fort. 7 hours in order to hold their position. I just want to explain to you something else, not from a Sikh perspective, because I mentioned this battle to a very senior British retired general. You'll see him shortly on the video. And he looked at this battle from a professional view. You know, we can get excited about it. This is our people. But he looked at it totally dispassionately. He said to me, he said, I didn't care whether they were Sikhs. They could have been anybody. Could have been Germans, could have been Japanese, could have been anybody. But I looked at the mission. And for me, the success of the battle was whether they were successful in their mission. It's no use dying if you fail in your mission. Their mission, as we've seen, was to communicate between the forts, was to hold that fort so that they could communicate. It was to signal. Who was the signaller? Gurmukh Singh. Who was the last person to die? Gurmukh Singh. So from that point alone, the other 21 Sikhs have succeeded in their mission. Their mission was to hold the fort so Gurmukh Singh could signal. And then he said something amazing to me. He said, when I look at what we require in the British Army at Sandhurst now, we require loyalty, yes. We require courage, yes. We require discipline. We require integrity. He said, then I looked at all of those, and then it occurred to me that actually the only people who could have pulled this off were the Sikhs. So he starts off by discounting the fact that these were Sikhs, and then through his rational analysis based on military training comes to the conclusion that actually the best people to pull it off were the Sikhs. Now, I can't think of a greater compliment to these Sikhs, to 21 Sikhs, than he gave. But it doesn't end there, and this is where I'm coming to come to a draw and move on to this very brief video before we go to questions. It didn't end there. As soon as news of this battle got back via Colonel Horton to the Punjab, the then Governor General of India, Lord Elgin, wrote a personal telegram to Queen Victoria. She awarded each of the Sikhs a parcel of land and an amount of money, I think about 12 guineas, I'm not sure, don't quote me on the figure. But more importantly, each one of the Sikhs is given an Indian Order of Merit. At that time, that is the highest award that can be given to any member of the Indian Empire, other than British troops, other than white troops. The law changes later, but in 1897, that is the only one. To this day, no other action in British military history has resulted in 21 Victoria Cross equivalents in one action. Never. They talk about the Battle of Rorke's Drift. I don't know whether you've seen the film with Michael Caine, but the figures there were totally different. There were about 147 British troops against 3,000 to 4,000 Zulus, but actually what the film doesn't say is that there were another 300 or 400 black troops in reserve who helped. But up to the Battle of Saragarhi, Rorke's Drift was the greatest number of Victoria Crosses awarded, I think about 14. Now, the reason, I go back to what we said at the start, why are we doing this? I'm not sure how many of you had heard about the Battle of Saragarhi until today, until recently, but I am ashamed to say that I was 40 years of age when I heard this. So those of you who are younger than that, you should consider yourself lucky. But the reason that we are promoting this battle is that it comes from the core values of the Khalsa from 1699. This is not some one-off example. In fact, one of the reasons I think we're dismissive of these things is that in our tradition it wasn't a big deal. You know, the Battle of Chamkaur was similar, if not bigger. The subsequent battles of Guru Gobind Singh were fought against similar numbers. But the reason we feel it's important in this country is this, that you will not find mention of this in Indian history books anymore. Because as far as they were concerned, it was an imperial battle. This was a battle for Britain. It was a battle for the crown. And you won't find mention of it here because these were native troops. These were brown troops. These were Indian troops. So it is our duty, if we are to save ourselves from historical extinction and that dementia I mentioned at the beginning, that we use Saragarhi as an example of the finest qualities of the Sikhs and the Khalsa that this country should respect and remember. And as I said earlier today at the Cenotaph, you do not measure the greatness of a nation by its numbers, whether you have 1 billion people that follow your faith. You don't measure it by the size of your statues and the size of your palaces. You measure it by the qualities of bravery and dignity which that community possesses. And that is why we, as a small minority that has never been more than 2.4% of the Indian population, can stand shoulder to shoulder here. And I hope those of you who are hearing about it for the first time, when you go into your schools and your colleges tomorrow, you'll do so with a renewed vigor, a renewed pride, and something that is to be not only remembered today, but every year we must make sure that the 12th of September is an important day. Because believe me, your future in this country is greatly dependent on keeping alive these memories. Otherwise, in 50 years' time, you'll be another minority from another overseas country, and there's nothing outstanding that will make you different and make you proud to be both Sikh and British.
Wolverhampton Sangat and Sikh Guru Tegh Bahadur Gurdwara, I would like to thank Harvinder Singh Rana for what was a very uplifting and moving and emotional presentation. And to follow that, what we'd like to propose is that we all stand up and for a minute's silence to remember all the Shaheeds and the Sikhs who have passed away throughout the history. So Jim, if you want to keep the minute time, please. And what we're going to do, we're going to have a minute's applause because we celebrate what they've given us and what they've provided us to enable us to do what we do today, to enable us to be all around the world where we are such a minority, but we give so much, and may long that tradition carry on.
सेवा देश दी जिंदड़ीए बड़ी औखी गल्लां करनियां बहुत सखलियां ने जिन्हां देश सेवा विच पैर पाया उन्हां लख मुसीबतां ਚੱਲੀਆਂ ਨੇ। ਅੱਜ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਵੇਖਿਆ ਕਿ ਵੁਲਵਰਹੈਂਪਟਨ ਦੇ ਟਾਊਨ ਸੈਂਟਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਵਾਰ ਮੈਮੋਰੀਅਲ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਸ਼ਹੀਦਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਯਾਦ ਕੀਤਾ ਗਿਆ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਨੇ ਅੱਜ ਤੋਂ 115 ਸਾਲ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਆਪਣੀ ਜਾਨ ਦੀ ਪਰਵਾਹ ਨਾ ਕਰਦਿਆਂ ਆਪਣੀ ਉਸ ਮਿੱਟੀ ਦੇ ਲਈ ਜਾਨ ਦਿੱਤੀ ਜਾਂ ਜੋ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਜ਼ਿੰਮੇਵਾਰੀ ਉਸ ਵੇਲੇ ਲੱਗੀ ਸੀ ਉਹਦੇ ਲਈ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਸ਼ਹਾਦਤ ਦਿੱਤੀ। ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਸਾਡਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਦਾ ਲੱਗਿਆ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਦੱਸਣਾ ਨਾ ਭੁੱਲਿਓ ਤੇ ਹੁਣ ਅਸੀਂ ਲੈਂਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਤੋਂ ਇਜਾਜ਼ਤ। ਦੇਖਦੇ ਰਹੋ ਸੰਗਤ ਟੈਲੀਵਿਜ਼ਨ। ਰੱਬ ਰਾਖਾ।